And you were saying that even if you were asked, you would not endorse either candidate right now. Why?
Neither is what the country needs. What the country needs is the moderates coming together to be able to work together and make great reforms. It needs a strong leader of the middle and to alienate the extremes. One extreme is going to have a war with the other extreme. And what the country needs is broad-based prosperity. One of the great issues that we look at is that there are two different countries going on, basically. Yeah. You could see it in the stock market. You could see it in the wealth, that it's a wonderful place to come up with the most brilliant ideas. The universities are the best universities in the world, and those talents create great inventions and so on. But averages are misleading. So it's a small percentage of the population. If you look at the bottom 60% of the population, you have the average American, 60% of Americans have less than a 6th grade reading level. We have a situation where you can see it in the cities. You walk around the cities, New York, Chicago, San Francisco, and so on. You smell marijuana, the kids are going to school high, the infrastructure's broken down, homeless people, crime, and so on. Look at it. Do we have water? There's only one thing that's needed, really, is broad-based prosperity. Broad-based prosperity.
Yeah. Who do you see who could bring the country together? Someone from the middle? Any names that come to mind?
No, unfortunately, I don't.
You don't?
No, I think people would have to surface and I would see it. All I know is that I don't see that.
Okay.
I ask everybody there, is there a strong middle of compromise and dealing with these things together, and then dealing with those issues? I don't see it.
How divided is your country, Ray, at the moment? And what are the risks inherent in that polarization? And if I can just take it from the play devil's advocate here, I mean, it sounds like the perception is you've clearly outlined what is wrong and the internal divide. But from an economic and a markets point of view, we've heard a lot about US exceptionalism. We've heard a lot about innovation. We've heard a lot about NVIDIA, Apple, Qualcomm. Driving this innovation.
What I'm referring to, I'm sorry if I'm not clear, and I'm not meaning to paint anything in a black and white way. What I am saying is the United States is exceptional in its universities, in its inventiveness, for a small percentage of the population, that if you go to those places, I looked at the stocks that have done exceptionally well. Look at the concentration in the markets. Okay, it's a limited number of stocks in the world that have done very well. And so when we include averages, we have to keep that in mind. And if you look at the number of people, I calculated that in those companies, there's something like 1.5 million people, half of which are immigrants who've come to the country, who have done very well in those unique areas. But then you look at the majority, and you look at, for example, education, PISA scores. I think the United States is something like 39th in PISA scores. There's, in other words, education level for the broad population. So an important thing to do is not confuse averages with exceptionalism. The exceptionalism has been in that domain, and it's really exceptional. But you need to have broad-based prosperity. When we talk about income, okay, and you talk about wealth, it comes from productivity, and that goes down to the individual level. So that individual will not be prosperous. They will have to have handouts, transfers of wealth, and so on. And there'll be all sorts of problems if they're not productive. They'll have drug problems. They'll have other problems.
Yeah.
You have to have broad-based prosperity, and it's very simple. Yeah, it exists in Singapore. It exists in certain things. What is the basics? The basics is that, very simple, Do parents raise their children well so that they have a good education not only in capabilities, but also in civility, how people behave? Do you come out to a society in which there is order and then opportunity? Capital markets puts money in the hands of those who can be productive, and that you have broad-based productivity. You should never have a situation where the population as a whole falls below a certain living standard. There are neighborhoods. I'm in Connecticut. My wife works to try to help poor students in important neighborhoods in Connecticut. In Connecticut, which is always one of the richest states in the country, 22% of the high school students have either dropped out of high school or are failing with absentee rates of greater than 25%. Wow. Okay, and there's crime and gangs and so on. Yeah. If I had to raise my children in that place, I'd be a revolutionary. Yeah. So the condition, we're here in Singapore today, everybody gets a good education. And there's public housing, that there's a standard, and they mix it up. We have a problem in terms of that level of differences in opportunities.
Yeah. So, Ray,